Welcome back, everybody. My name is DM Cross, and this is Praetor Magic. And today, this is going to be the recording of our Reflections of the Council podcast. I'm here with Magical Hacker. How are you?
Hey, what's up? Doing well. How's everything going?
And the hidden Frexen Walker. Hey, buddy, what's up?
Doing well. Just hoping the old Discord chat holds out for me here.
So Frexen had some technical difficulties before we started, so we're hoping that his audio doesn't cut out like right in the middle of this. If it does, we will try to talk over it. But for those of you watching this on YouTube or listening on Libsyn or Spotify, this is our weekly podcast. It is live streamed via twitch.tv/PraetorMagic, but obviously it's recording for you. So today we have an interesting topic, and this is an interesting podcast in general because we didn't come up with this topic. Normally what we do is after each Monday we kind of have a group chat where we brainstorm, come up with something, and then get out some talking points, kind of craft where the discussion will go to kind of have an idea of where we're going and blah blah blah. But we didn't do that this time because we didn't have a great idea last week. So we asked you guys via the Discord server, which there will be a link down below all of these things, and there's a link down below the Twitch stream right now. What did you guys want us to talk about? And the topic that you guys actually not only brought up for us to talk about, but then talked about all, I think, Wednesday night or Tuesday night for like 2 hours was deck building. How we do it, how we think about it, and things of that nature. And of course, like I said, you guys talked about it for a few hours, so you guys had some of your ideas, and I guess you guys wanted to hear our ideas. I don't know why. I built terrible decks, so does Frexen.
Yeah,
None of
mine are
us
the worst.
None of us mono blue infinite combo out. So
Yeah, that's for sure.
that's why we had to
Way-
get Hacker. So he can
That's
do
only
it.
because you make me reveal my Paradox engine before I play it.
Oh,
That was good.
Now we're just throwing shade here. That's what this podcast
All
is
the
about.
old games. We're just
Yeah.
all the old games.
All the
So-
old games.
This when we did settle on this topic, because we came up with this one, we came up with another one, which we decided against because we asked you guys for ideas and we wanted to use your idea. It kind of terrified me a little bit because it's going to go one or two ways with me. Either I'm going to ramble on and on and on and get distracted easily and keep going for tangents, and eventually Frexen's going to be like, hey, why doesn't somebody else talk finally? Or I'm going to try to summarize to combat that, and you guys are going to feel like I'm not really giving you an answer to the topic. So I'm going to go last, I think, so that I can't take over the podcast, but then I'm in a time constraint so that I can't just talk for an hour. Does that make sense?
I like it.
Okay. So Phyrexian, however, builds decks constantly. As a matter of fact, between the stream we had yesterday and today, I would be disappointed if he said that he didn't build 2 decks in the past 24 hours.
No.
No,
I
I'm
just
not
built the one
disappointed
for
because you did it.
No, I just built the one for yesterday. Well, like took my paper deck and made it into a 25 deck online deck.
So you've only built 1 deck in 24 hours? Why are you slacking?
Well, I'm now thinking about making NFNs a 3DH discard. Does that count?
Yeah.
See, look, it's
I'm already on the
begun.
mission. I'm already on the mission because it's only 18 cents.
Oh, it could be the second episode of Chronicles. Oh.
What, sir? Don't hurt my feelings. All my technical difficulties with this laptop.
All right, so deck building. I guess the overall question is, how do you do it, and try not to go off for the next 2 hours, because it seems like it's a pretty broad topic, right? Like, again,
yeah.
like I said, I could sit here and I could
Definitely.
just talk and talk and talk about how I've built my decks in the past. So you're talking
Well, I
about,
think
but
I think a good starting point is exactly what we were just kind of talking about, is like picking the commander or the card or what that you really want to play around and make a
Mhm.
deck based off of. Like we started with Kaya and we're like, well, unless you're playing DM's house rules, you can't play Kaya as a commander. So if we want to do like a Kaya discard deck, who's going to be the commander? And it's like, hey, maybe Anafenza, maybe Magical Hacker was throwing out Chromium, maybe something else. But then you can start, you really want to play around this one card. What cards allow you to do that? I mean, I'm assuming most of our discussion is going to be going on, EDH and
yeah.
Commander, because that's the format that we play the most.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not going to be talking about my modern decks. That Valdor would have to come back from the grave and talk about that.
And probably berate you.
He would. Yeah. So, what do you think, Packer?
I mean, for me, it's a like a step-by-step process, but for sure, the first step, I think for me personally, and probably for everybody, is to figure out either what commander I want to build around and why. Like I did with my Atali deck, where I looked at the abilities, like, oh crap, I get to cast stuff for free from my deck and from my opponent's deck, and I can get extra combats and do it all over again. So build around the commander, or like have have in mind what I want to do with the 99 cards, and then try to figure out the commander after that. So like for my Zero Aryan deck, I knew that I wanted to play Jund Reanimator, but I didn't know who I wanted to play as the commander. So like I think that's kind of the first step, is either figure out what you want to do with the 99 or what you want to do with the commander, right? Because that's the first thing you got to do. And here, the example was, you got Kaya, you want to build a discard deck. It's white and black, so you can't play Nekusar. What do you do? And I agree with you. I at first I said Chromium, but I think you're right. I think Anafenza is definitely the stronger choice for that. You lose out the blue, and blue has a lot of good wheels that would be nice in a discard themed deck. But you get some, you give some. What about you, Seth? What's the first thing that you do when you build a deck?
So I will say that when I build a deck, it is typically very commander orientated in terms of what the deck's going to do. However, the way, like, the steps I guess I take to get to the end point can be very different. And I was thinking about this on my way home from work today to try to, again, summarize how I was going to say things. My Madrasah deck, for instance. Madrasah is, Sultai commander, and it's very value based. Doesn't really matter what you do, but it does matter that it's permanent based. So when I built my Madrasah deck, I basically just built a Sultai deck, which I had done before because I had Tasker deck, which was reanimation based Sultai grindy value. So the initial list was very similar to almost the same, and obviously that doesn't work because Tasker can bring back instants and sorceries, but Madrasah can't.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just saying, right. Yeah.
Oh.
You're right
we're
about
disagreeing with you. You're like,
yeah.
I thought somebody was gonna.
Tasker does better returning than instants and sorceries than Madrasah. Math checks out.
He was waiting for us to disagree with him on that.
No, I thought somebody. It sounded like somebody was like right, and then like had a question, like you were gonna lead into a question. Anyway, so obviously when I went back over the list and I saw as many instants and sorceries as I had, whether they were counters, removal, or whatever, obviously I had to cut them down. So I started looking just initially for permanents that did whatever that same thing was. So if it was a counter, I looked for a permanent that could, counter. And there's only a few of those. If it was like cutting out the ramp instants and sorceries, I looked for permanents that ramped. Then it became a question of how do you, like, Madrasah is a reanimation based Sultai commander as well. So you needed to have a way to get your value things into the graveyard, and then that way you could bring them back out. And actually, the very first edition I did was mostly creature based. I replaced as many things as I could with creatures. So the counters were creature replacements. The ramp was even creature replacement. Some of the removal was creature replacement. And then you gotta remember that Madrasah only lets you bring one permanent of each type back. So I wanted to diversify so that I wasn't like, oh, my deck's full of creatures. I mean, my graveyard's full of creatures, so now I can't bring anything but one. So I had to go back and strip out some of like the creature ramp for enchantment ramp, the creature draw for artifacts. So like Thran Dynamo is a good card in Commander, but Hedron Archive is ramp and card draw in a Madrasah deck that you can get back. So it was always like a lot of iterations of trying to keep things balanced and slowly realize what the cards needed to be until we got, like, based on what the commander did. Now, the reason why I say that each commander is different is because if I were to switch over and talk about my favorite ever deck, Franco, that was very different. The entire deck, first thing was just, how do I make a bunch of tokens? And basically, that's all Krenko really cares about. And as I went through the steps, I actually got farther from that, where it became less about Goblin tokens and more about Goblin combo synergies. Because I
Mm,
realized after doing a lot of research, I found the infinite combos that exist with Krenko himself. There's like 3 or 4 ways that you basically say, okay, I have infinite
right.
goblins.
Yep. Yep.
But then people suggested, oh, well, why don't you play Kikijiki? I was like, I mean, why don't I just put Kikijiki in the deck? And those few infinite combos. And it very slowly became, instead of narrowing down more to the cards that I wanted to do the best based around what the one commander did with, like I did with Madrasah, this became
Hmm.
broadening out to why don't I have more different synergies to the point where like some of my combos have nothing to do with goblins. Dual Caster Mage and Twin Flame doesn't matter what I'm copying. It just gives me infinite creatures, but it's in the deck.
Hmm.
So, and then like Edgar Markov, and this is going to be the last one that I do before I let other people talk. Edgar Markov, my original deck list and my current deck list are not that different. I think the
Hmm.
only difference was that I slimmed down the mana curve. So it was always tribal vampires, and most of the support cards didn't really change except for like new cards coming out that were just better support cards for tribal synergies.
Hmm.
But I started realizing my curve was getting to like a higher 3 point something, and that's not what I wanted.
Hmm.
I wanted to be able to play lower to the ground and faster so that I could aggro at people out better. So it was originally more like value vampires, and some of them do cost 6 or 7, and now it's like I run 1 mana drop vampires just because that means on turn 1 I have 2 vampires, which means on turn 2 I can attack for 2 or 3.
Oh
So
yeah, it's definitely snowballs with those vamps.
yeah, so I think that's where I could go, and like I could go on to the next deck and the next deck and the next deck, and I could
Hmm.
go on to my 3DH decks. How every time it's a different thing because each deck needs something different.
Right, and
Um,
you were talking a lot more about like the refinement process.
yeah.
Do you find that you spend a lot more time on the refining process than on the like the first draft of the deck, typically?
Again, I think it depends. I have a Lord Windgrace deck that is a landfall Jund deck that's mostly token
Hmm.
based. The refinements have been smaller tweaks. So the majority of the
Hmm.
list was right the first time, I guess, quote unquote, or I
Yeah.
liked it the way it was the first time, and I've just tweaked it
Hmm.
as like a card here or there. And I think from the original draft, it's only different maybe 12 cards. Whereas Muldrotha is
Yeah.
probably like all the way down to some of the lands being different because I realized, oh, I'm stupid and I should put in more lands that sacrifice themselves.
Right. Right.
Um, Muldrotha is probably almost more than half different than the first draft.
Wow. Wow.
But
That's
yeah,
a
like
huge difference. Yeah.
yeah. And then Krenko, if you saw my original Krenko deck and then looked at my Krenko deck now, it's probably aside from the basic mountains and Krenko, completely different. Because I didn't have a lot of the cards. Like Krenko's one of the few decks that I bought singles for.
Oh, I gotcha.
I don't buy a lot of singles because I don't put a lot of money into paper magic, especially the past like 2.5 years or so. Because I don't have
Hmm.
a paper play group anymore. So I don't put a lot of cards. I mean, a lot of money into cards in the first place. So Krenko has really been like my bread and butter of like, here's a card that I want for this deck because it needs it for XYZ combo. So that's
Right.
also another huge thing is whatever your budget is for
Oh yeah.
deck
It's a
building.
huge. Yeah. It's a huge kind of thing you have to keep in mind. For you, Frixian, would you say that you spend a lot more time on like the first draft in terms of like spending time and getting it right on the first draft, or do you spend a lot more time in like playing it out, testing it, doing a revision, making it better after the games?
Um, I do some tweaks after making the deck, but usually I just aim for making a first draft that is well enough. And what that really comes down to is I've pretty much designed an almost formula of the way
Hmm.
I build decks, in particular 3DH decks now since I've built easily 60 plus of them now. I mean, I only have 23 current for season 3 because I've decided not to keep them all updated going between seasons. But I've easily built 60 plus unique 3DH decks at this point since January of last year.
Dang.
I've built at least that averages out to at least a deck a week that I've built. So it's really become like using that formula of, okay, if my CMC, like when I'm looking at the deck, even down to the fact that if my CMC is between, 3.5 to 4, I'm running 38 lands.
Yeah.
100%, I'm running 38 lands and no less. Sometimes I'm even running 38 lands under that, just depending on, like what my important spells are, how much my commander costs, and other things like that. But if I'm over 3.5, I'm always running 38. If I'm in that 3.2 to 3.5 range, I'm usually running 37. If I'm between 3.2 and 3, I'm usually running 36. And then under that, especially like stuff with Marwyn, where it's just a bunch of mana dork elves on top of the fact, I'm running like 32. But and so you've got that's one thing that I think people like, and we've had discussions even in the Discord about this, where like building your deck where you're doing things like keeping your lane count in the right place, especially in a format like 3H where you don't have the fast mana and some of the other mana fixing options.
Yeah.
Like making sure your lane count's in the right place so you aren't sitting there and saying, which I've had games too where I'm running 38 lands, and I mean Bush had the game last night we played where he was running what he said 44, 45, and he got stuck on 5 lands. So we all have those games, but you can definitely decrease the number of games you have by just looking at things like that, looking at how many ramp cards you're going to put in your deck. I have a minimum of 8 ramp cards I put in every single deck. Usually 10, but a minimum of 8 in every deck. Like dedicated cards just to ramping. A minimum of 8 draw. I try to get to 10 again, but a minimum of 8. Usually the ones I'm running less than 10 though, like less than 10 draws and tutors, are ones where the commander is a draw engine or a tutor on its own. So the commander is giving me some sort of card advantage. Same thing with removal. You need 5 to 10 like single target, and you need 5 to 10 RAS. Well, not 10. 10 RAS is too much, but about 5 RAS. Like
10 RAS, nobody plays the game.
Some decks run more, some
pretty
less.
Similar numbers.
But yeah, so these are things that I think that people like when they're designing their decks, sometimes they get so tied up in, I want to do 1/1 counters, I want to do this 1/1 counter theme, and this is going to be awesome. And they throw in all these great cards for 1/1 counters, and then by the time they're done, they're like running 35 lands because they've not left enough slots for lands, and they're running not much interaction or removal with what their opponents are going to be doing because they've crammed their deck full of so many cool things that they want to do. And while that's about it, if you want to have success in Magic, you have to be able to interact with your opponent's board states, and you have to actually, have mana. So if you just run off the train of I'm going to do this one thing, I'm going to do it really, really well, sometimes you kind of, ham fist yourself there.
So Bush in the chat asked if you
were talking a lot about having a certain number of things when you build your deck. And that kind of reminds me of 8x8 theory. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. Those of you in chat have heard of that, or Seth and Friction, if you guys have heard of that. No. But with 8x8 theory, the idea is if you want to have an effect to be consistent in a commander deck, and you want to see at least one every game, and you want to see it in the early game, you got to have 8 of those of that category in that deck. If you wanted to see it like once a game, but it doesn't necessarily need to be early, you can go as low as 4. So before I even sit down to make a deck or even find a single card except for the commander, I'll go and I'll like plan out the numbers and add up the numbers before I have even like any cards. I'll add up the numbers and make sure they add up to 62, because +1 is the commander, and then I always like to have 37 cards in the mana base. And I do 37. You had a formula for it, Friction, but for me, it's more that when it comes to my decks, they're not going to be that different because of the average CMC, right? When you have a normal game of Magic and it's just you versus someone else, you want to make sure that you curve out. But with Commander, if you don't curve out, that's not as bad for you because of the fact that it's multiplayer. The more you curve out, the more people are going to balance against you. So when it comes to the early game, that's not where the games are won in regular Commander. Obviously, CEDH is something different, but in the early games, that's not where a commander deck is usually won. Usually it's won in the mid to late game, more often the late game where it's like turn 9 to turn 13, where the games really are decided who wins and who loses. So with the math of it, I wanted to limit both my chance of getting mana screwed, and my chance of getting mana flooded. And 37 just it mathematically kind of came out to it'll reduce my chance of getting mana flooded where I am drawing like 3 or more lands by turn 5 or 6 and getting mana flooded where I don't draw any. So that was kind of where I went with that. But yeah, I definitely do like the numbers that you had. I usually go for 8. 8 card draw is like my maximum unless the commander itself has card draw. Then I'll go down to like maybe 6, 5, maybe even 4. Ramp, I also have 8 for that. 4 board wipes, 4 spot removal, like including creature removal and item removal, where it's like artifacts and enchantments. And yeah, then basically the rest of the deck is, I mean, there's like 4 tutors, something like that. Then the rest of the deck is whatever the theme is. And I usually use my list for those categories because sometimes you're like making like for example, you might be making a counter based deck where it's all about counter spelling stuff, and Guile is not something that I would think of right off the top of my head as counting as card draw, but with all those counter spells in your hand, you can just counter something and then you got a free card off of it because of the Guile.
Yeah, and I definitely, like, when I'm talking about card draw, I'm talking about any card that provides card advantage. I would put in that card draw.
Mm-hmm. Like Sunbird's Invocation, you would put that there?
Yeah. I would put Sunbird Invocation in there because Sunbird's Invocation is going to see you extra cards and get you extra cards on the battlefield, most likely.
Right,
especially
right.
if you put it in the deck, if there's a reason it's in the deck, I would hope.
Yeah.
So that does actually, with me saying that raises an interesting point of some people see this card and they're like, oh, this card is so cool, I've got to put it in my deck. And they get cards like Sunbird Invocation. Well, Sunbird Invocation is a really powerful red card. It doesn't go in every red deck. And I think the Command Zone kind of hit down this on their podcast, the last one they did, where they were talking about
Overrated.
what was overrated? Yeah. Cards like Eternal Witness, where Eternal Witness is a good magic card, very good magic card, but doesn't go in every single deck that runs green like it seems to be if you look at EDH Rec and some other stuff. So it is making sure that you're picking the best cards for what you're doing. So if you're running Sunbird's Invocation, you want to make sure you're running a deck that's going to be able to take advantage of it. Even though it's a cool card that will get you incremental value regardless, you really want to make sure that your deck is designed to use those cards as effectively as possible.
So maybe this is me. I don't know that I agree that Sunbird's Invocation is a good example of a card that's not good in every deck, because it seems to me like Sunbird's Invocation is good in any deck where you're casting cards from your hand, and that doesn't seem like I mean, I guess there are some red decks that aren't going to be doing that as much. Grenzo Havoc Razor seems like it might be using a lot of its mana to cast spells from opponents' decks rather than from their hand, but is that what you're talking about? Like, when a deck
I'm not even talking about like think about Krinko. Krinko's a red deck, right? Krinko does not want Sunbird's Invocation. There are plenty of decks I can name. Valduk. Even Atali doesn't really want a Sunbird's.
Any kind of burn deck where you're going to rely on X spells.
Yeah, burn decks.
You don't want to hit X spells with this.
Yeah, so
that's a good one. Yeah,
there are a lot of decks that like it's especially in red where you're talking about. Red has a lot of aggro, like with with goblins, with Voltron, with others like. With burn, that Sunburns just doesn't fit in that deck because you might be casting spells from your hand, but you're also trying to win the game faster than this 7-drop enchantment is going to get you if you're in Boros or mono red or something like that.
6-drop.
Or is it 6-drop? Sorry,
6-drop.
Oh, I see what you guys are saying.
It's still a lot. It's a large mana investment, and then a lot of times because of the reputation of the card, right? Because people call it Sunbird's Winvocation for a reason, because of that reputation. A lot of times it gets played and it gets instantly removed. So you've just spent your entire turn casting that card, and then someone running appropriate interaction in their deck. I keep mentioning appropriate interaction. Has removed it, and then you basically just burned a turn and burned a card for no advantage.
I see what you're saying now, because I think now probably the reason that I disagree with you is because when it comes to red decks, I'm not trying to be the scariest person. Look at that, Bushcraft gifted a tier 1 sub to New Dark Cloud. Thanks so much,
Thank
Bushcraft.
you.
Look at that. Yeah, look at it, being nice.
I got rid of the rose water, but we got to do the rose water.
But I was gonna say with my red decks, I'm trying not to be the scariest one at the table, and that typically means that I'm trying to like sneak in the win at the end of the game. So for me, it's like Sunbird's Invocation pretty much goes into every like red deck that I have, unless I don't have room for it. Right? If I feel like adding it would be like taking away from the power of the deck because it loses the theme. I'm just not running enough cards for that sub theme. Then I don't put it in, but. It's kind of interesting because I don't know if I would consider it card draw, to be honest. It's one of those cards that you can play it down on the table and keep doing your own thing, and then it'll generate extra value like for free. But when it comes to like card draw, I always think of you want to be able to cast a lot of cards from your hand and have options, right? With Sunbird's Invocation, you do have options and you can cast them, but you'll still end up with like nothing to do with your mana. Even with the Sunbird's Invocation, because it forces you to cast that stuff then.
Well, Esper's making a point here. He says there are certain cards that I'll just play for fun, even if I know they don't necessarily fit in or are going to up my win rate. And that's another important point, that there are people like as they're building decks who have different perspectives. Like my perspective is very much I'm trying to build a good deck that can be moderately competitive and kill some people by turn 8.
No, it's turn 6 with you. Don't you lie. Don't you lie to these people.
Turn 6 to 8, okay? Just depends.
Look, if you're playing against me, I'm not trying to beat you at turn 8, so I'm not the scary one at the table. It's obviously
There's the infinite combo player.
So,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, so it is a different perspective of like what you're trying to do with your decks and how you're beating it. Yeah, that's not incorrect. New Dark Cloud. He says I treat my deck like a machine. I do. I have a certain formula that I run. I run it and I try to make them all be as successful and work as efficiently as possible.
Gotta have a certain amount of gears. Gotta have a certain amount of oil.
Yeah, that Phyrexian oil, right?
Yeah, you walked right into it. I will say back to Esper's point. I agree. There are cards that I've played that are not super great cards. One of them being Humble Defector. This is a card that I love. I love. I know Valdor played it in one of the Praetor Magic episodes. I think the second episode where we did kind of anything, and he played his Mathis deck. This is a card that I will literally pass around a game, and like I'll let everybody get advantage from it. I just love the theme of Humble Defector, and it's literally a trader card. Like you're giving everybody value, so it's kind of like funny to me. There was other cards like I used to run. Sorry for the clicking. I used to run Bear of the Heavens in my Omnith deck, basically just saying, if anybody messes with me, I will sacrifice this to like Goblin Bombardment, and I'll just ruin everybody's day. And there's been times where I've done it too, just because of people.
Hold it over the table, huh?
Hey, don't mess with my things.
Yeah,
I
at
will
that point,
drop the whole world on your face.
I mean, if I were at the table with you, I would say, well, basically, it's already happened. So what do you guys want to do before it happens is basically the way you have to treat it.
I mean, you better have an instant speed way of doing something. I'll drop it.
Yeah.
I never played it out unless I had a way to
sacrifice it.
Yeah, sacrifice it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's
and
for
typically a backup way, because like obviously Goblin Bombardment, people would be like, oh well, I'll just K grip it or whatever, and then what are you gonna do? Now we can exile it without, now we have time to exile it. Like no, I'll probably have like High Market or something on my field, untapped and sitting with my lands, kind of hidden.
Like Phyrexian
Walker. You mean hidden under a swamp? Like,
hey man, as long as it's with my lands, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy.
I'm not saying like hidden it to the point where you can't see it ever, but like if the swamp is on top of the High Market as opposed to the High Market on top of the swamp, and like you could see the art and read the card still if you pay attention, then I'm not cheating. Like,
oh yeah, no, I'm not saying you are.
Everybody piles their lands up.
Yeah.
Seth equals big cheats. Again, it's not cheating if it's public knowledge. If it's on the board, like if the title of the card is visible, you can see it if you're paying attention. And if you ask me, do you have high market? I would say yes. I do. It's right there. If you
Oh,
say,
you know what?
what's on your field, and I say this enchantment, that enchantment, and my lands, and like I've got 3 lands untapped, I didn't lie to you.
Yeah. You know what I really dislike is you ask someone in paper like, "Hey, how many cards do you have in your hand?" And they're like, "I don't know." They don't answer you, and even though it's like you're supposed to answer, it bugs me. That's kind of a side point, though.
I mean,
So I had a question earlier, and it was going back when way back when Frexian was talking about having his like quotas for the categories. Is
Mhm.
how often do you put a card that kind of fills that category, but it's also part of your main strategy, even if it's not great? And Locust God having Arcane Denial, any kind of artifact deck, like if something's running Revel in Riches, so you run what is it, Spell Swindle to get the treasures, stuff like that. Like it's
Mhm.
a 5 mana counter, but there's potential for you to get, like, what if you counter the thing that's trying to get rid of Revel in Riches and it gets you to enough? You know what I mean? Like it's very Christmas landy, but do you do things like that? Do you sacrifice the running Spell Swindle at 5 as opposed to running Counterspell at 2 in
no.
order to feed into what your strategy is?
That's the simple answer from Phyrexian. No.
I mean,
I do not sacrifice the overall integrity of the deck to play with the theme. I mean, you can make the deck theme based without sacrificing the integrity of the deck to maintain the theme.
there are some things though that can overlap. There are definitely cards
definitely.
like that. Yeah.
There are definitely cards that can interact, but if it's like picking a card I'm like, this card is not really good, but I'm gonna put it in here just because it, could be good if this is also in play and this is also in play. When you start having to make those justifications to yourself for why you're putting the card in the deck, that's when the card should not go in the deck.
The
So
card should be good enough in the category, I think.
Yeah, when you're having to like go through that inner dialogue of like, yeah, this could work because of this and this, then I feel like when you're having to try to like do that justification, that's when I'm like, nope, time to cut it.
well, so what about like Arcane Denial in the Locust God? Because
Well,
it's still
Arcane
a 2
Denial's
mana
just
counter.
Yeah, it's Arcane Denial.
It's a
Just a decent
counterspell.
counterspell in general.
Yeah.
I mean, Spell Swindle is a counterspell.
Yeah,
It's
but
just a
Arcane
5
Denial is
mana
a
one.
counterspell for 2 instead of 5.
Spell Swindle is potentially a counterspell where you can gain the mana if you counter something big. If you counter a 5 or up thing, you're actually getting mana back because
Yeah,
of the
but
treasure
it's
tokens.
the same concept as Rewind, with Rewind being at 4 mana, and then you can
Mhm.
untap lands.
Mhm.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can technically do it, but holding up the 4 mana or 5 mana for interaction, especially if you're trying to play, more 75%, is,
Do you think
not where
there's
you
a
want to be.
difference of
Because
making
then you're
the
basically saying, I'm going to skip my turn to hold up this counterspell until
Well-
about turn, 9 or 10.
so is the justification going from 4 to 5? Because at 4, especially in blue, like you have a lot of other kinds of spells you could be casting at instant speed. Like, what was the card that?
Fact or fiction?
Well, there's that, like Aetherize, right? So
Aetherize,
you could
yeah.
be bluffing an Aetherize when really all you have is a Rewind. And even then, like you get the double bluff because you could rewind something and say, I might still have the Aetherize. Maybe I kept the 4 up because that way I could rewind, get a counter, and still have mana for Aetherize. You know what I mean?
I've definitely used Rewind in like EDH decks, or not EDH, 3DH decks, but like any of like my paper decks that run blue. It's not a card that I run just because the 4 mana it's a lot to have to. Like I said,
I
it's a
agree.
lot to have to hold up.
Yeah, I agree. You want to be able to, unless you're playing like an instant-based
That
deck
mana
where,
efficiency thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're trying to be like, I'm gonna play everything instant speed, which is what I used to. I used to have a Midome deck that did that. Everything was like instant speed almost.
A what
Then
deck?
I guess there it makes Midome the Ageless.
Oh, I don't think I've ever pronounced it that way, but yeah.
I used to pronounce it Medomai, and then I got really, I know this is going to sound super strange, but I got really passionate about looking up how it would be pronounced in the Greek language. So I went into Google Translate and I put the names, and I went to Greek and I asked it to pronounce it, and that's how it'd be pronounced in Greek. So I figured, hey, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, since Theros is based off of Greek culture, anyways. But anyways,
Sphinx is Greek.
I don't know if they're Greek, but
Sphinx is.
Theros is.
Oh yeah, it was a Theros card. I get you.
Yeah, it was a Theros card.
It could have been Roman. You don't know. Their mythology is so close together.
Sphinx
I'm
is
kidding. It was Greece. It was Greece.
Yeah. But I was gonna say Rewind was one of the cards I did have in the deck because holding up 4 mana was no big deal there. But in, let's say, a Talrand deck where there were things I wanted to cast on my turn, or maybe a better example would be like Angus Mackenzie, where I wanted to have counter spells to protect some of my alternate win conditions. I couldn't play Rewind, even though it was technically a free counter spell, because it would mean that I would be 4 mana less to do my sorcery speed stuff. But one question that I had, a new card that we had from Guilds of Ravnica was Dawn of Hope. And there's like 3 levels that I could see. Like, is it good enough in a life gain deck? I would say yes.
No.
You don't think it's good enough in a life gain deck?
No.
Not
So
unless you're talking like a mono white one.
Okay. So I was thinking like in a life gain deck, playing this. In a tokens deck, like it's just caring about tokens, I actually don't think I would run this card. And then the last like category is like what about a deck that neither gains life nor makes tokens? Like, is this good enough? Let's say in a mono white deck.
Because then
Like,
it's not
for me,
synergizing.
There are too many cards that do what it's trying to do better.
There's Well of Lost Hope for the draw.
Yeah.
For tokens, like making one.
There's Heliod, Endoketra, and Mobilization. All do it for cheaper. I mean, it has it's a soldier with lifelink, but
yeah, I think,
I wouldn't do it for the token production part.
I think it depends a little bit also on like, are you trying to run soldiers specifically?
That could be
because
another
Heliod doesn't
part of it too.
Then.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Like I think it has probably a couple of very.
But
niche...
mobilization is soldiers, so. And it's for 1 less mana.
But it's not a draw engine.
But this is such an ineffectual draw engine, though.
Is it though? Because it can help you draw a lot of cards. Sure, you're paying a lot of mana for it, but if you're top deck mode, you're probably gonna have a lot of mana.
Yeah, but
I mean,
so for me, I would say life gain is like the place I would play it. If I have a life gain based deck or a deck that I know will gain a lot of life, I'll definitely play Dawn of Hope. Like I have it in my Licha deck, which is all about life gain. Licha, Sanguine Tribune. So like that's
I think Dawn of Hope only has like some niche decks where it goes in really well.
Maybe. I don't even think it goes that well in those niche decks. Like,
I mean, I don't think it's bad in those niche decks because, again, I mean, if you're going to be getting
life
anyway,
is it good enough? Is it good enough to make the 99? Are there not other cards even in mono white that you could be running to draw cards? Like people have mentioned Well of Lost Hope if you're doing life gain. People have, like you mentioned it, Esper mentioned it, Bush mentioned Mind's Eye. There's just so many other cards.
But like you mentioned, you gotta have at least I want to have 8 cards.
Redundancy, yeah. I'm thinking for the fact of redundancy because, again, if you're running mono white life gain or mono white soldiers, you really have what? Because if you're running mono white soldiers, you're not gaining that much life, so you're probably not running Well of Lost Dreams. So this works. You probably have what? Mentor of the Meek, Mind's Eye, and what for draw?
Alms Collector, maybe Palace Jailer. You might have Pure Steel Paladin and SRAM if you've got equipment.
Well, if you're running soldiers, you're probably running equipment.
So there's a lot of there's
but
a
you
couple.
have to be able to hit with that.
Yeah, you've got Meza Enchantress if you're going enchantments, but it feels like all of card draw that is specifically white color identity, not including the colorless. Because I think if you're playing mono white, you're probably playing a lot more colorless than white spells. But when it comes to white, it's like all very specific to a certain niche. You've got ones that are like life gain, like Dawn of Hope. Ones that are like Bygone Bishop, where you're trying to cast small creatures. Mentor of the Meek, where you can make tokens and it works for Mentor of the Meek. Stuff like that. Like there's a lot of kind of more specific things for mono white. But
I like Huevo Beans' point of a mana sink. That's a good point too. I know when I built Selesnya Savala, that was like a big thing for me was the find mana sinks because I always generated too much mana that I couldn't do anything with. Even if I did have card advantage, I still wound up having cards in my hand that either weren't instant speed, right? And like a bunch of mana that went to waste. So I found mana sinks.
As
So
of
I
yet,
think-
any life gain deck. No, I haven't tried to build mono white life gain, but any life gain deck I built, even when I was looking at Oloro the other day, this card popped up, and
I think
did
Alora's
not.
a special case because you know you're gonna get the trigger every turn.
I mean, in some decks you'll know that too. You know, I feel like
I mean,
decks that have a lot of.
not with the consistency that you know you're gonna get it with Alora.
Oh yeah, Alora's definitely better, but I
Yeah.
think in a deck, let's say you're playing a life gain Karlov deck, for example, I could see playing it there because with Karlov, you've kind of built the whole deck to trigger Karlov a bunch of times, so it's probably going to be triggering Dawn of Hope a bunch of times too. And unlike a lot of Mono White's other card draw, like Mentor of the Meek, Dawn of Hope is an enchantment, and so people don't usually get rid of enchantments, especially ones that are 2 mana, because they're like, well, it's not really worth it. I only have like 1 or 2 ways to get rid of enchantments in the deck anyways. Probably not the way people should build decks, but they don't usually have a ton of ways to get rid of enchantments, and so they don't feel like wasting it on one that just card draw. Like Phyrexian Arena, they usually don't use it on that. Happened recently though.
I was about to say, I purposely got rid of 2 Phyrexian Arenas in an Alora deck because it was free card draw. And
honestly, if I had Phyrexian Arena and Dawn of Hope on the table, and I was playing a life gain deck, I would hope that people would get rid of my Arena before they got rid of my Dawn of Hope.
Well, that's because it's multifaceted. I mean, yeah, you could draw a card, or you could potentially draw cards and get tokens. I think that's a good point that it is an enchantment as opposed to a creature.
Mm-hmm. The combo of drawing cards and enchantment as a type is just such a nice, like, it's a nice package.
Yeah,
right? You're gonna draw cards and you're gonna keep it. It's not gonna be going away that often.
Esper says, "Psycho taking out your Dawn of Hope, Eden."
Hey, more for
Savage.
me. More for me.
So you're leaving his Phyrexian Arena then? That sounds like a bad idea. But I did like the Karlov example. I think somebody brought up. Karlov is meant to do, like, it doesn't matter how many life you gain in an instance, it's multiple instances. So like I ran a Karlov deck, so it was always, I just need to gain 1 life, but I need to be able to do it multiple times. So especially like Pristine Talisman in this are great because you trigger it and you pay for half of it. That's a great that's a great combo.
Sundrop, that's another great one. Probably one of the like pretty underplayed cards, but if you want to get 4 life gain triggers per round, gaining 4 life a round for just 2 mana investment, I mean, that's like, it's hard to beat that, but it is just life gain. So if you're one of those people that say, well, life gain doesn't do anything, I'm not going to play it.
Well, even in so my Karlov deck was a zombie token deck before Anointed Procession was a thing. And I could imagine having like Zulapur Cutthroat out, Ashnod's Altar, right there with Dawn of Hope. Then, of course, again, I still have Pristine Talisman because it's a Karlov deck. I still have other little ways to, like, Sundroplet's not a bad card in a Karlov deck because it like you go a full turn cycle and Karlov's all of a sudden an 8/8. So I actually do think Dawn of Hope's probably pretty good for a Karlov deck. And again, it spits out lifelink creatures. So for every time they block or they attack and they hit, like every time they deal damage, you're going to get a bigger Karlov. So I think Karlov's probably an amazing commander for Dawn of Hope.
The because magical hacker keeps on trying us just to discuss all the cards he wants to talk about that are in his decks.
Hey,
are we helping you build a deck? Is that what this is? That's not what we meant by deck building.
Frixian's the one building a deck over here.
Yeah, how's that Anafenza deck you're doing whenever you're quiet going?
It's going okay.
I'm 20 cards in. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
More like 40, but still.
It's
That's how he does it once a week. He goes fast. He's quick at it.
I've gotten pretty good at it, yeah. I mean, you start with those things I was talking about. You start with the removal suite you want. You start with the card draw, and since I've already made plenty of decks, and Golgari, Abzan, and
Orzhov and
Orzhov, then
Selesnya.
yeah. Well, not
I
so
was
much.
gonna say
Selesnya.
Selesnya.
Well, I
So-
mean, actually, I do include the one. what's it
That
called?
one card.
The one
that one
Selesnya card
Selesnya
that
commander I
exiles
always
2
make.
artifacts and/or enchantments.
Sylvan Reclamation.
Yeah, that one I include in a good number of decks. Where I'm running Selesnya colors, it's a pretty good card in terms of removal.
And it's basic land cycling if things are dire.
If you really need it, yeah.
Yeah. I do so when you're building decks, right, and you're going through your categories, is there a category that you always do first? And I'm gonna ask Phyrexian first since he's building a deck right now.
Categories I always do first are ramp, card draw, removal.
Okay. In that order?
I start with those 3. Usually yes.
Okay. What about you, Hacker?
I don't know that I can totally answer the question the way that you're like asking it, because for me, before I even look at any of the cards, I get the numbers for my categories. And sure, as I build a deck, maybe I'll say, okay, I think I've got enough card draw on this deck. I don't need to be playing 8, whatever. But I kind of pick all the numbers first, and then after I have all the numbers, and I know that I can kind of just go ham on the categories that are kind of the focus of the deck, because I'll be doing card draw later. That's what I usually do first. I usually do like, what's the most important category for the deck? Because let's say I'm building a Braids deck, all right, and I'm trying to build a Braids deck with a lot of clones in it. And I'm not entirely, let's say I'm not familiar with what clones there are available. And so actually, what's a better example? NESH. I didn't know what Sphinxes were available. So as I was building NESH.
Okay.
There we go. This whole podcast was just a trick to get us to let him talk about NESH.
Hey, I was not the person that suggested it. This was suggested by our fans.
At what category did you put Dream Hall and Omniscience into it? Tell us, please.
Who did you pay off to make this the topic for this week? That's what I would know.
Whose topic was this?
Listen, if I paid someone off to make the topic something, it would probably be either how monocolored needs to be viewed as more powerful by the community, or how we need to stop playing tutors, or how we need to start playing more cards.
Hey.
I know, right? Can we
deck, sir?
Those are my categories. All right, those are my heart.
Can we hang up on him? Can we just
hashtag spoilers, everybody? Don't cut the video. Come back in 30 seconds, and then we'll be talking about deck building again.
I muted him.
NESH and kind of how I built that deck. I started out with Sphinxes because I knew if I didn't have enough Sphinxes to do what I wanted to do, then I would have to just start the deck over. So for me, it made no sense to start off with card draw, where I knew I was going to have enough, and then not have Sphinxes and not be able to tell if I had enough in that category. So that was kind of what I do. I put the categories, I make the numbers. Oh, and if you always have trouble, like, man, I've got 103 cards in the deck, and I don't even have lands in there yet. So what the heck am I supposed to do? Like, this is like a lifesaver. Just plan out the numbers ahead of time, and then you won't get to that point. I happened to me all the time. There were so many cards that I loved and I wanted to play it, but until I did the 8x8 theory, and it's kind of like a modified version where I changed the number of categories and I changed how big the categories are. Until I did that, that was my problem all the time. And then after I did that, man, I never had that problem anymore. I never had that problem. Deathly Watcher wants my deck list. I'll give you my deck list, Deathly Watcher.
No, you don't need more of that.
But what about for you guys? When it comes to your decks, if let's say you're over, right? Let's say, like I mentioned, you're at 103 cards and you don't have the lands in the deck yet. What do you do for cutting cards out of your deck?
I start over. If I'm at 103 cards before lands, I've probably done something terribly wrong.
So you just go from a clean slate?
I don't think I ever get to that point, because the way I was going to answer the question that I asked you guys was that I do similar to what Phyrexian does. I go ramp first. With some decks it's easier. Green decks obviously, like, all right, cultivate, Kodama's Reach. I like Grow from the Ashes over Explosive Vegetation now. Sorry for anybody who's big on Explosive Vegetation. And just a few other things. In black, crypt gas is typically an auto include, and a few other things that I like. Some of the ramp that I have is land based, so I try to do my lands last. I always try to do my lands last so that I don't get my numbers
Yeah, me
mixed
too.
up. I don't want to put 2 lands in and then see like, oh, I'm at 38 cards in the pile, which means I can then go. I mean, 62 cards into the pile. That means I can start on my lands because if 2 of those are lands, then I'm really gonna have 40 lands, and that might be too much.
Yeah.
Although I might let it go, I'm typically of the mindset that more lands is typically not a bad thing unless you're going like 50 lands, because then again you've probably done
Ouch.
something terribly wrong.
Ouch. Yeah.
But yeah, and then New Dark Cloud just that. So we're talking about Madrasah as well, like in colors that don't have good ramp, so red and white, and blue even really because their ramp is mostly Madrasah. Though
Even
I'll
black
put that ramp
without
in
green.
there. What was that, Frickton?
Even like mono black without green, a lot of your ramp is artifact ramp, like your
Yeah.
extra planar lenses, your gauntlet of power, stuff like that.
I mean, even sometimes I'll justify that like expedition map is kind of a ramp card if I'm always getting Cabal coffers with it. I guess
Yeah.
it's kind of like pseudo-ish ramp. It's not ramp obviously naturally, but it kind of does the same thing.
Yeah, I always put it in my tutor category because
Yeah,
tutors are basically almost anything.
yeah, but I mean, expedition map is a very specific thing, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's always going to net you a land. And again, in decks where I'm running black, I'm almost always getting Cabal coffers or Tomb of Urborg. Tome of Yawgmoth, sorry.
To answer a Deathly Watcher's question, I think using a variety of resources, because he's asking which is better, EDH rec or tapped out for it. I think using a variety of resources, because I'll use EDH rec, I use Scryfall, I use Gather, I use tapped out. Like I use a lot of different options as I'm building a deck. I'm being able to draw from more options and get more ideas for what you kind of want the deck to look like before you start constructing it is always a good thing.
Yeah. I think my 2 biggest resources that I use when building are Scryfall, because I typically know what I'm looking for and I just need to know what the cards are that I'm looking for. You know what I mean? So like So Scryfall, for those of you who don't know, the syntax is very similar to like SQL queries. And that's something that I have to do for work. So I'm very comfortable using Scryfall as a search tool, as basically a database search tool. So I can typically like, I know Valdor's done it a bunch of times where he's like, hey, you know how to Scryfall really well. Can you find me cards that do this thing with these parameters and blah blah blah? And a second later I'll send him a link. That's the result, and he'll be like, I don't understand how you do that. And again, I just do this kind of stuff for work, so it makes sense to me. So between finding, again, knowing what I need, and Scryfall just giving me the possibilities, and then EDH rec, like even the Scryfall has an EDH rec ranking sorter.
That's super helpful.
I use that a lot too, just to kind of see what other people, and again, like that ranking all goes back to what EDH rec picks up in its data, which is all based on us. So the sites that they scout for data, it's ranked higher if they seed a lot. So if people run bad cards a lot, it's gonna be ranked higher.
Right.
So between those 2 things, I think those are like my main tools. I'll occasionally go to tapped out. But that's like for some very niche things, like a deck that I want to see built this way. Like, when's the last time?
I'll say, even before I knew who Magical Hacker was, like actually knew him, I've used Magical Hacker's tapped out list before when I'm looking for like I was like Googling like blue board wipes or something like that, or to put more board wipes in my town deck, and perhaps Magical Hacker's little list of board wipes in every color. And so I used the list before I even knew who Magical Hacker actually was, before I saw this gorgeous face in this camera and talked to him every Monday.
Where, me?
Yeah, you.
No, he's talking about the art you have behind you.
Oh, okay, all right,
There's
cool.
a couple of faces over there that he's admiring.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I don't think I've
but
ever. I'm trying to think of I'm still trying to think from before Frexing was talking about hackers resources about like the last time I got a really good idea from tapped out. I think I used tapped out and I don't really use it much anymore because I moved over to deck stats because I do like the visuals that they give, and like the site's a little less clunky. I think Tapped Out needs to update their coding really to be a little bit
Yeah,
more
there's a
modern.
lot of problems with that aspect.
Yeah.
I told you so back when I first started. I'm glad you've converted.
Yeah. So, but I think what I use Tapped Out the most for when I was using it is to get ideas from people by having my decks there. And a big example would be I've been since Kaladesh, I've been perfecting a Carry Zev deck that I really enjoy, and I've actually never gotten to play it. It's all theory crafting. And
Like the monkeys going bananas.
stop it. And I have actually, if you go out on Tapped Out and you search just Carry Zev as the commander and sort the decks by like the highest voted one is mine, and it's a primer
wow.
written on how I design the deck and how I feel it should play based in the beginning, middle, and late part of the games and different strategies and ways that end the game.
Well, that's cool.
And it's like a pet deck. And again, I've never gotten to play the deck. It's fantastic. I always try to goad Stephen Green into hitting Justin Parnell with a big monkey every time they do the fan submitted decks. I always try to like hit him with a big monkey. It sounds like something you'd like to do. It's mono red. But he never seems to
Does
see
it have lightning bolt? Does it have lightning bolt?
It doesn't. Because lightning bolt
Well, there's your problem.
is not that great of a card. They said before that they have the rights to what do you call it? Like switch cards out. So he could take something out if he really wanted to. But
no, that's how you tempt him to do it, by having that card already. That's one fewer card that he has to
you could hit Justin Parnell with a gigantic monkey.
And then bolt him in the face. That's what Steven wants to do.
Like,
I don't
you
care
could
too much
almost
for it, but...
one-hit somebody with this monkey. That's what I'm saying. That's how this deck works. You could basically, if the monkey gets through, somebody could just die.
That's good and all, but he likes lightning bolt. You gotta put lightning. Come on, I'm trying to help your deck be more tempting for Steven to play it.
Phyrexian talked about the integrity of the deck here.
That's right.
Okay.
But,
well, to answer the question that was
just throw cards in willy-nilly, hacker. Didn't you listen?
I'm not putting it for me. I'm putting it in for Steven, obviously.
But anyway, so I got a lot of the tweaks from Tapped Out because I started this deck. I put it on Reddit. That's another resource I used. I used to use a lot more. I don't use it as much anymore. I don't really know why. I guess because a lot of the decks I build now are for articles or for 3DH, and 3DH they don't understand the budget, right? So it's hard for them to suggest stuff. And for the articles, I don't want people to see the deck too much before I write about it.
Yeah.
But Reddit gave me a lot of suggestions, and Tapped Out gave me a lot of suggestions over like the years now that this deck's been getting honed. And one of these days I'm gonna buy it, but I haven't yet. So I think Tapped Out is good that way, but I don't go searching for other people's decks. I don't want to just build what the other person has exactly, and that's kind of why I like EDH Rec, because it gives you so many possibilities, and then you kind of filter out the things you don't like to have the list you do like. And you might wind up doing the exact thing, but at least it's not like, oh, here's this person's list, play it, and not at least have some thought process into your deck, right? It's going to be your deck. So even if you come up with the exact same deck as the person next to you, you put it in there because of the way you thought about the deck and how it was going to run. So I think that's important.
Yeah. Oh yeah. To kind of answer the question from before, which was what like would be the two biggest resources, I definitely have Tapped Out as like one of my top used ones. I definitely use the staple lists that are on my profile page. I use those like for like almost half of every deck. The other half I get from like Scryfall using the regular expressions. And actually on my YouTube channel, I started doing something recently where, since I build a new deck for the channel every month anyways, I started to film myself and kind of talk about it and talk about my process and stuff. And if you want to see like a shorter version of like the entire thing from step 1 to step 17 or however many steps it is, like check out the Braids deck, the the Braids deck building video. If you want to see a longer version, like more in depth and more about every single step, then the one that's coming out tomorrow is like a more in depth version. I got one going live tomorrow at 11 a.m. So looking forward to that one coming out. But it is long. I will warn you, it's very long. But one of the things I like to do right at the very end, once I've finished everything with the deck, and I think, okay, this looks great, I'll take the list, and I use Scryfall's saved cards feature. I don't know if you guys use that. It's really sweet. You open a card, a new tab, and then right underneath the picture, it says save. You press save, and it saves it in your cookies so that when you go to the saved cards page, all your saved cards are there, and you can export it as, words. You can export it things, so you don't have to type out the card names anymore. So that's really convenient.
This is
but I think that this is on Scryfall.
Oh,
it's on Scryfall.
Yeah, I never knew that.
Yeah. So let's say you have, I'm going to open up here, Arena Lich Queen. When you go to the page, you'll see the card, and right underneath it, there's a little purple button, has a little star, and it says save. If you press that button,
never paid attention to this. Like, I have it on screen now. Never paid attention to this. This is how we bring the cards up. It's a Scryfall. Surprise everybody.
Yeah. When you press save, it'll add it to your saved cards page. You go to the bottom of the page, and right there underneath find cards, you'll see it says saved cards. You go to that page, and it has all those cards there. So I use it a ton for deck building. I'll go, and whenever I want to add a card to the deck, I just press that save button. And then once I'm done, I go to the saved cards page, and there at the bottom, you'll see it says copy pastable text, where it says toolbox. And I go into all this on my deck building videos for anybody who wants to hear this again. You go to copy pastable text. It'll open up a link with all the card names, and you just select all. And I'll usually copy it, and I'll go to EDHREC and put it in the recommendation button. So there's a button at the top of EDHREC where you put in a list of cards with your commander, and then it'll suggest cards that are not in your deck that a lot of people run. So I'll use this kind of like just to make sure that I didn't miss anything obvious. Like, for example, for the Midome deck that I had, I wanted Vidalcan Orrery and Leyline of Anticipation. They're two garbage cards for garbage people, but they're good in the deck. No, I'm just kidding. So there are two cards that can give my commander flash, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to cast Midome with flash. So when I didn't have to counter anything, I didn't have to destroy anything, cast down Midome and not have to worry about it.
I don't know. I think Vidalcan Orrery is a pretty overrated card. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't run it in every deck. It was just whatever. So I put it in I put it in Midome, and I found it by using the regular expression on Scryfall for looking for stuff that says as though it had flash or as though they had flash. And I found those, but I didn't see Teferi Mage of Zhalfir, right? Because it wouldn't come up in that search. Teferi Mage of Zhalfir says that creatures you control actually have flash. So while Vidalcan Orrery lets you cast stuff even though they don't have flash, Teferi actually gives it to your card. So it's like not really a big difference, but it is something that didn't come up in my search. So when I put it into the rec page for EDHREC, because I had Vidalcan Orrery and Leyline of Anticipation and Scout's Warning and Winding Canyons, I had all those cards. It also came up with Teferi, and I'm like, I forgot about this card, so I was able to include that one.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
I'm not gonna answer a long answer because that's all in my videos for Alchemist.
That
Refuge.
Wasn't the long answer?
No.
Yeah,
no.
I was just.
We started a new podcast just to talk about this now. Hey, welcome back. It's DM and Hacker, Reflexive Walker, or whatever.
Hey. Here's this tutorial video now on how to use all these websites.
Now we know what next week's topic's gonna be. We're just gonna talk about how to use all these tools.
Oh no, I got a lot of ideas.
No, I mean that was good though. It was. I honestly had no idea that save button was there, and I've only used the EDHREC recommendations thing once, so I didn't realize quite how it worked, which is kind of weird. Considering that I write for the site.
I will say though, I can't take credit for this save button. That I heard from a podcast called Commanderin, I believe.
Oh yeah,
no, it's Commander's Brew. Commander's Brew. That's the one. Sorry, Commander's Brew. Commander's Brew. I heard it from them because they said that. Oh yeah, we use Scryfall all the time. We use the saved feature. I'm like, save feature? What's that? Looked it up, and man, it is so cool. It's so cool.
Not a PS1 game. There's no save function here. Oh no, there it is. Found it. Hey, button. Interesting.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have to maybe think about coming back to this topic because believe it or not, we have been over an hour,
mm-hmm.
and it seems like we still have more to say. So maybe there will be a part two. Maybe we'll call this one part 1. But so Frexing, any last minute one tip, maybe 2 on deck building that you think people, aside from you don't put enough removal or interaction in your decks?
Oh, I'm
Give
sorry.
us like a throw out a tip
one more time. Number 1, put more interaction and removal in your decks.
What did I just say?
Interaction with graveyards, instant speed interaction, board wipes, people. You need to be able to interact with things other people are doing. But then I guess really the secondary one is just make sure like your mana is set, like your ramp and your land count. Like in all seriousness, you need mana to play the game of Magic. So, and everyone has been in that situation where you're sitting there with not enough lands in play and you can't do anything and you're just miserable. And you're hoping everybody spares your life so that eventually you can get lands and then suddenly win the game. But you can really help yourself out. It won't happen near as often if you're putting in the right amount of ramp and the right amount of lands in your deck.
Okay. Hacker, what about you? What are some of your personal tips?
I don't know, man. I mean, to see the long version of this answer, just look up Alchemist Refuge of Magical Hacker. You'll see it on my channel. Short version, though, try the modified version of 8x8 theory, where before you even get any of the cards in your 99, you decide what categories you're going to have. You decide how many cards in each category you're going to have. And keep in mind, 8 is like what a consistent category will look like. And when you start like getting comfortable with, okay, I know I want this number, like I have 14 of this card, so I'm going to see it like 2-3 cards every game, that's that kind of thing. Then you really get into seeing why it's such a powerful deck building tool. It will cut down your deck building time in half, and that's including like your revision time. So as for Derek, remember, when you're building a deck, you need at least 8 shots of hard liquor to begin with.
That's how you get your first draft that you have to tweak 10 times. For me, I think the biggest thing that I had to learn over like a lot of time of building decks, and again, like I built a lot of decks because I have articles, 3DH, Magic Online, the Magic Online Commander League, personal decks and paper and stuff like that. So I have brewed a lot of decks, similar how both these guys have. I think the biggest thing I had to learn though is learn to be okay with not having half your deck go to whatever your quote unquote main strategy is. It is okay to have more support cards than strategy cards if it means that your deck's going to run smoother. Like, don't only have 10 cards that do the thing you wanted to do with your commander, but don't say, like, oh, half my deck has to be this strategy. You know what I'm saying? Don't
Now, when you say half, do you mean like 50? Like, literally half the deck? Or do you mean like 31 of the, like, non-land cards?
Even that, like, if you need more support because of, let's say, it's a high mana deck or something like that, put in more fetch then. Like, build your deck to what you need. Like, make sure you have the support cards for what you need. Don't cut out support cards and undercut the consistency of your deck just to try to do the fun thing. Because if you don't get to ever do the fun thing because your deck's not consistent, then why did you do it? You know what I mean? Like, build for consistency. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's important.
Build your support cards. Oh, Bushcraft just sending out subs to everybody. That one went out to DB Cross. Thanks again, buddy. Giving 3 gift subs in this channel. Bush is just high rolling. These are his subs. These aren't his dollars. These are his subs. But I think that's going to be it for us. I think Frexing is trying to run away. I heard the wee one in the background. Okay, he did get to go. He doesn't have social media, so that's fine. Magical Hacker, you do have a bunch of social media, so why don't you tell us where we can find you?
The most important one, based off of this episode, is my tab, where you can find all of staples. That's going to be tappedout.net /MTG. Actually, hold on a second. It's not that. I'm saying something that's not right. It's tappedout.net /users /magical hacker. You'll find all the staple lists there. If you want to go on Twitter and you want to see me talk about how I hate having to do the pillow fort staple list because there's so many ways that Pillow Fort can be worded. Oh my gosh. My Twitter account is magical__hacker. If you see me on Magic Online, it's magical_hacker. Not on Facebook, on YouTube, it's Magical Hacker MTG. I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it. I'll tell the important ones. You can see me on Reddit. I go there very, very rarely.
For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, or Libsyn, and you Bushcraft again with another tier, another gifted sub, you will be able to find the links to everything he just said in the descriptions down below. So don't feel like you missed something or you couldn't catch all of that. We got you covered. For Praetor Magic, of course, we are twitch.tv/Praetor Magic every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow us on youtube.com/Praetor Magic, where we have these weekly podcasts come out, and twice a month we have our Magic Online Commander League videos. You can follow us on twitter.com/Praetor Magic and facebook.com/Praetor Magic. There is a Reddit account, and I just today finally started posting back on Reddit. We'll see how it goes. I stopped because people were not just critical of the quality of our videos, but rudely critical. So I kind of stopped doing it, but we'll try it again because we have made improvements since season 1, and I think the videos and the games are just overall a lot better. So, and of course, if you want to read my articles, they come out every second and fourth Friday of the month on edhrec.com. So, Frexy, look, you're back. You don't have any social media. Why do we care?
Yeah, no social media, but you can find me on the Discord,
where we will eventually be doing EDH Chronicles some way, somehow.
3DH Chronicles, sir.
What did I say?
You said
EDH.
We'll do both. I don't care. We won't do both.
You can do the EDH Chronicles, and I'll do the 3DH Chronicles.
Isn't that kind of what I already do? With my articles and my things? No, that's not true. Because sometimes I write about the same commanders. But yeah, I think that's all we got.
If you're doing both, where is Danny letting you have all this time from?
I don't sleep at all. I will be up for the next 30 minutes cutting audio and downloading this video.
That explains a lot about these episodes, honestly.
But in order for me to do that, we have to end it. So make sure you guys are here on Wednesday. That's going to be 3DH. And then Friday, again, 3DH for 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Next video, next podcast on Monday, I think is normal. But then after that one is the 17th? Or am I
think so. Yeah, yes. 2 weeks from today is the 17th.
Yeah, we're going to have a special guest on the 17th. Not telling you who it is. Big surprise. Come here on the 17th. But that's all we got for you guys. Peace.
Have a great night.